welcome everybody. I appreciate you all taking the time out of your days to be here. And if you haven't seen the bio, I'm Tomato Torres. I help busy professionals and entrepreneurs achieve success without sacrificing balance. And I help you create this with meaningful time and purposeful productivity. Today we have a pretty full agenda, but also time for some interaction, some activities. So make sure that you can feel free to let us know where you're joining from in the chat. I shared that I am joining from my home office today in Minneapolis. And also there is a Google document. I think everybody should have access to the chat that started earlier today. You can just click on that Google Doc. And then when you open it, click File to make a copy. And then you can save it to your own computer or drive. Great. Okay. It looks like people are accessing that. If you can confirm in the chat that you're able to save a copy for yourself of that Google Doc, to make sure that that's working all right for everybody. All right, great, thanks. And also, you should also be able to see my Leverage Your Success screen share. Is that good for everybody? You can see it? Okay, thanks for the confirmations. Thumbs up. I hope that's also for the screen share. It looks normal for me. Great, thank you. All right, so I think we can go ahead and dive in. So this is Leverage Your Success with the Four Tendencies. If you're on the wrong flight, this is your opportunity to deplane, but maybe you'll be happy to join for the ride anyways. We have lots of great tips and some great activities, I think, in that Google Doc for you all to follow along. Hopefully it's not distracting. Don't go too far ahead in the doc, but definitely keep up. And if anybody is not sure where we're at in the document, please put that in the chat. I've found people to be really helpful. And so if I don't see the chat right away, I'm sure somebody else will be able to chime in. All right, so today's discussion, we will clarify your desires, identify actionable goals, discover your tendency, and find tools to keep yourself accountable, as well as reassess and recommit for lasting change. And I did also add a poll. So once you know your tendency, if you took the quiz today or earlier, feel free to click which tendency you are, obliger, upholder, questioner, or rebel. And we will get more into that soon. Oh, thanks for reposting the Google Doc. There's a little down arrow next to the camera below my screen. You should also be able to see access to the Google Doc there. And so you're aware research shows that you get the most out of a meeting the sooner you engage. So those people that were already on it with the chat, you're going to get a lot out of this. This also helps me to help you by gauging where everybody's at. And I know that you all want to be a good and supportive audience. So thank you in advance. And let's dive in to clarify your desires. So just 5 minutes in here and we are already going to get into that Google Doc. And the question here is, let me get to that next one, to really think about what do you want and brainstorm a list of what you'd like to achieve personally and professionally in the next 12 months, keeping in mind various areas of your well-being. So physical, emotional, social, financial. So this is going to be number one in your handout. Brainstorm a list of what you'd like to achieve. It's not going to be exhaustive. And of course, whatever you come up with is all good. That's the idea of a brainstorm. So don't dismiss what comes to mind. And when you have at least 3 ideas, put 3 in the chat. I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes. If most people are done before then, awesome. Just let us know when you have at least 3 in the chat And we'll put in a little music again. So that's 1 minute down. Give everybody another minute if you need it. You can enter in the chat 3, the number 3, when you have at least 3 ideas of things that you want to be achieving either personally or professionally this year. Great. Awesome. All right, that looks like most of us here, and we just have a couple seconds on the clock. So we will go ahead and move on to the next one. So looking at 2 or 3 of those desires and determining your why. What are the impacts that these changes would have on your life? And it's really important for us to identify our why, because change is really hard, and reminding ourselves of the why behind our desire can help to keep us motivated. And for some examples, if your goal or desire is to exercise, the why behind that may be to be healthier or improve your fitness. If you want to connect more often with friends, it might be for greater life satisfaction or happiness, or to feel like your life is fuller and more interesting. So go ahead to that second one on the worksheet, and I'll set the timer again for 2 minutes. And once you have at least 2 ideas, add a 2 in the chat for me, please. All right, we're starting to get some responses here. I can tell some people are a little bit quicker than others, which is awesome. All right, this is great feedback. So I have a good sense here of what works for people. All right, we got a couple of seconds left to wrap up. And honestly, you only needed 2 desires All of you that put 3, you're knocking it out of the park. Okay, great. Okay. Awesome. All right. So now that you have some ideas of what you want to be achieving in the next year, we're going to take a look at how to get smart with this. So audience participation, if you have ever, I'm getting out of myself. So a goal without a plan is just a wish. So this is the author of The Little Prince. And I think it's great to have wishes and dreams, but I would say that it's really important to develop and accomplish actionable goals. So we're going to get into that. I'd like to see a me in the chat if you've ever set a goal and either one, either never started or stopped after a few days or weeks. If you can relate to that, put me in the chat. And if that's you, know that you're in good company. About 80% of New Year's resolutions fail by mid-February or 6 weeks. There's even some me's in here. Yeah, so this a lot of people can relate to this. Another thing that happens very commonly is you make progress on something and then you go on a trip and you get off track, or you have a big work project, you get off track, and then you have a really hard time getting back on track. If that's you, say yes. I know this happens to a lot of people as well, because in my experience with coaching, it is equally hard to start a second time sometimes as it is the first. All right, great. So good to know where we're at with all of that. So SMART goals. If you are familiar with the SMART goal, if you've done one before, or if you've seen this format, which is really helpful for goal setting, I'm curious to know, just put a SMART in the chat. And SMART stands for, it's an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Great. We got a lot of smart people on the call. So to give some examples here, in order to be successful with accomplishing something, it's helpful to have something that's very specific and measurable. So I created a goal a year ago. Each week, I will schedule a meeting with a new connection in order to grow and strengthen my network. So it even includes my why in there. I want to grow and strengthen my network, which helps to grow my business. And I'm not waiting until December 31st to try to schedule 50 or 52 calls, right? So it's really breaking it down and saying, okay, each week I'm going to identify a couple of people that I can connect with and get something scheduled for the weeks to come. And in my experience last year, it was achievable, it was relevant, and of course, time bound. So there is an area on your worksheet, number 3, to create your own SMART goal. So we'll have 2 minutes to do this again, and you're putting into the worksheet what date you're going to start. It might be publishing your monthly newsletter or your first newsletter. It may be reaching out to someone that you've meant to connect with for a long time. It's great if you can have something kind of recurring that you want to be doing, like creating 20 new LinkedIn connections or followers on social media. So starting on this date, I will do this action in order to achieve this desired outcome. And I'll stop talking so y'all can focus on that. And you have about 30 seconds left. If you have something, you can go ahead and write done in the chat. Great. Okay. Now, I would say that SMART goals can be effective for everyone, but they can be even more effective when used along with your behavior change tendency. So we'll dive into the four tendencies. This is a topic that I'm super excited about. Anybody who's ever met me in person, I'm often able to identify what your tendency is. It's kind of a fun parlor trick or party game, I would say. So this is Gretchen Rubin's Four Tendencies. And her book is the indispensable personality profiles that reveal how to make your life better and other people's lives better too. I have my signed copy from Gretchen Rubin here conveniently. So this is a framework that Gretchen Rubin developed. And the idea is that knowing yourself and understanding what works for you will really leverage your success. There's an area in the handout where you can circle your tendency and take notes there. So that should be next after the SMART goals. So feel free to highlight or underline that. And then you can take some notes below as we go through each of the tendencies for tips that are going to be relevant to you. And hopefully everyone's seen the quiz link. It was in the event description. And it's also further up in the chat. I'll add that here again. And someone shared, it was surprising to me how accurate my tendency description was. Yeah, I love that. It's really fun. And honestly, I was coaching for maybe 7 years or so, 7-8 years before I discovered the four tendencies. And it really just helped me facilitate my clients' change just so much better, understanding what really works for them and tailoring those approaches to their tendency. So we tend towards one of these four archetypes, which are upholder, questioner, obliger, and rebel. And understanding these tendencies improves the way that we motivate and influence ourselves as well as others. And we'll explore each tendency so that you can figure out how to optimize your mindset and get yourself on the right track. So the four tendencies describe how we respond to expectations, and we face two kinds of expectations. Outer expectations have consequences. If you don't meet them, then you may do poorly at work or get a traffic ticket. Inner expectations tend to be the ones that you decide for yourself. So you're not necessarily accountable to anyone else, and there usually aren't consequences if you don't follow through on a New Year's resolution or learning a new hobby. If you'd like to share what your tendency is, you're welcome to do so in the chat. There's also the poll if you want to do that privately. Totally up to you. There's no best tendency. Thank you. I'm not surprised the obliger added there. Great. We're seeing some rebels too. And there are definitely great things about each of you. It's really about identifying what's going to work for you and your tendency. We have a questioner who already has a questioner in the chat. I'm going to read the question to myself and see if it makes sense to cover it now or later. Okay. I think we'll cover the questioner's question once we get to the questioner tendency. How many times can I say question in one sentence? Many times, apparently. Okay, we're going to start. Thanks. We're going to start with the obliger, and the obliger is the largest percentage of the population. And obligers put a high value on meeting commitments to others. They'll do just about anything for a client, a patient, a family member. They require or do best with deadlines, oversight, monitoring, other forms of accountability. An example is someone who was an excellent student in college with the support of a coach and a team, but now they really struggle to stay in shape when left to their own devices. So instead, obligers are more likely to succeed by creating a system of accountability with others, like finding a gym buddy or trainer, leading a book club if they want to do more reading. And since they have trouble setting limits on others' demands, they really need to be cautious of neglecting their own needs. Anybody who is an obliger, I'm sure you can relate to this. So it's super important to enforce limits to prevent burnout, and understand that saying no to one task allows you to say yes to another that may actually be more aligned with your values or objectives. And make sure as you follow along in the Google Doc for your tendency that you're making a note of how you respond to those inner and outer tendencies, or expectations. So that obliger is going to meet those outer expectations and resist those inner expectations. And I thought it'd be fun. I'm going to do a quiz for us later with an old 90s sitcom, but I thought I would bring in The Office as some examples. So examples of obligers from the TV show The Office are Pam and Michael. So if that is helpful to paint a picture for you. Next, we have the upholder. And actually going back to the obliger, when I started at the beginning today saying that the engagement helps me to help you, I was specifically speaking to the obligers. I kind of set that expectation, and there's some different messaging for some of the different tendencies that we'll get to. So the upholder, famous upholder, I would say, is Gretchen Rubin herself. Upholders are self-directed. They can meet deadlines. They can take initiative without much supervision. Upholders want to know what should be done so that they can do it. I initially thought I was a questioner because I had a lot of questions, but realized that I want the answers in order to clarify expectations and follow through. But also, since there is some overlap, this is hard to see, but in the circles, they do overlap. So a questioner can lean towards a upholder or vice versa. So I realized that I was just asking the question so I could get clarity, because I ultimately just wanted to follow through. And upholders enjoy routine, may have trouble adjusting to a break in routine, and they may want to meet goals even if it's maybe no longer relevant or doesn't matter to anybody else, like exercising daily while on a family vacation, which is something that myself as an upholder, I have been guilty of. And that brings us to the next tendency here. So if you're an upholder, you can make a note of meeting those inner and outer expectations. Now we have the questioner, unlike the upholder, is and the upholders from The Office are Dwight and Angela. And I would say you might see some common theme in those two being somewhat rigid, or regimented is maybe a more positive way to look at it. So when we come to the questioner, unlike the upholder, they are asking questions to decide if the task actually makes sense to them. Like, am I going to do this or not? They tend to object to anything that is inefficient or what seems arbitrary, like New Year's resolutions. Like, why would I start a goal on January 1st when I could start it on, any day of the week if I really wanted to? And they put a high value on reason and information. Yep, we got 100% from a questioner here. Yeah, I think it's so fun to see like how much this framework resonates. So they put a high value on reason and information and may need additional research before taking action. And questioners should be careful not to succumb to analysis paralysis, the inability to make a decision for fear of not having all the facts. So set limits on the time you dedicate to research before taking action. Yeah. Same here, questioner, me, awesome. So this is probably an okay to address, time to address that question. Oh, and the questioners from the office are Jim and Oscar. Okay, so the question was, how do you establish a SMART goal for something that's contingent on a prior measure? For instance, if I want to move into or buy a place of my own, but it's reliant on market prices, financial stability, what do I do? Shift my goal or my why? I think this is a complex question, and you're probably not going to love my answer, but I think for questioners, again, that big pitfall is analysis paralysis, like thinking that if you just continue to research or follow the market, that you're going to find the perfect answer. And there's actually a rate of limiting returns, or you might miss your opportunity in the market, for example. So, we can't time the market. But when it comes to making major decisions, you honestly would benefit from time limiting the time you put into research or waiting. I think doing a list of pros and cons could be really helpful. Like if you say, okay, if I jump on this and take action in September, what would be the pros and cons? What's the market looking like right now? I just heard that interest rates may be rising in 2022. So that's probably important information. Maybe I want to close on a space by December. So I definitely need to make a decision by October so I can start looking and get a space locked down. So hopefully that's helpful to keep that in mind around limiting the time and using the information that you have. And in terms of like limiting returns, like if you are trying to buy a new computer and you spend 3 hours researching, and then you spend another 3 hours researching, the idea is probably the second 3 hours is not going to be as fruitful. Like you get a lot of the information you need when you just get started. And then new information that comes in is probably going to be less and less. Okay, so yes, I tend to eat the whole elephant instead of doing one bite at a time. One thing I'm hearing is to shift the goal start date to the future somewhere, or make the goal date contingent on an externally validated point, and then don't really prep a whole lot before that point is reached. Yeah, definitely give yourself a deadline. Like, maybe I'm going to reassess on October 1st and decide if I'm going to go ahead and do this now for October, or if it makes more sense for me to put it off until December. And it's not procrastinating as much as it is making an intentional decision. So hopefully that's helpful. And I'd love to connect with you more one-on-one if you want to learn more about how to implement your strategies, some strategies for your tendency. And we're going to go into that here as well. Okay, so when I had mentioned at the beginning today that research shows that you get the most out of a meeting the sooner you engage, this is true, but I was also in particular appealing to the questioners. All right, now we have the rebel. This is a really interesting group. So the rebel can do anything that they want to do. They are much less likely to do anything that anybody else wants them to do. I've done a lot of coaching around tobacco cessation. Sometimes in conversations, there are other things like alcohol use, or even just like relationships with food. And people always tell me, my partner really wants me to quit. And it's like, well, how does that make you feel? It's like, well, I want to dig in my heels harder. So that resistance is really common in the rebel. If you're familiar with Nir Eyal, he wrote the book Indistractable. And he's a great example of a rebel. He's someone I follow a lot as a thought leader around productivity and time management. A lot of entrepreneurs tend to be rebels. So while rebels are 17% of the general population, I would say that might be double amongst entrepreneurs. The fact that you want to solve a problem and carve your own path, do something outside the standard, outside of the box, that means you're more likely to be a rebel. And I would say the second group of entrepreneurs, second largest group, would be questioners, because you have to ask a lot of questions in order to solve a problem and have a product or service that's a solution. Okay, so rebels put a high value on freedom, choice, self-expression, and authenticity. With this in mind, it can be helpful to reframe work as completing a report or task at work pays you the money to enjoy your freedom. Or the sooner I finish a task, the sooner I have that free time for myself. Rebels may also choose to act out of love, a sense of mission, a belief in a cause, especially when it's tied to their identity. Like, I'm an athlete or a teammate. I'm a great parent. I'm a responsive boss. Thinking about their identities in this way helps to motivate them. And at the beginning, when I said, I know you want to be a good and supportive audience, I was appealing to the rebel identity, although some of you rebels might even say, no, I don't. But we'll talk about ways to tackle that identity as well. Rebels from the show The Office, Creed and Stanley. Stanley is a rebel who may actually tip towards questioner. But I'm pretty sure it's Stanley that was like consistently reading the paper or working on a crossword puzzle during office meetings. So you can tell he's not too concerned about following the rules or what other people think of him. So now we're going to play a game called Name That Tendency. This was fun for me to put together. So who remembers this show from the 90s? Say yes. All right, got some thumbs up. Oh, and the person who asked, I might be a rebel too. Do I have to pick just one? I'm going to say you are a questioner who tips towards rebel. And there's definitely an overlap there. And if you're questioning, you're probably a questioner. If you're rebelling against this whole idea of being categorized into a tendency, that maybe make you a rebel as well. So while you can lean either way, you definitely have kind of a foundational tendency that you're going to tend to most of the time. So for those of you, can all four overlap? I would say no. I'm looking at the little diagram, and they like, they're Venn diagrams that overlap on each side, but rebels are not going to be obligers. Like they connect, but they don't intersect. And sometimes questioners really have a hard time, teasing out which one am I, perhaps. Okay, so let's get into the activity. So Seinfeld, each character can be seen as personifying a different tendency. From left to right, we have Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer. And I'm going to have people put in the chat who they think is the rebel. Kramer. And if you're not familiar with the show, people have told me that they have just looked at people's clothes or the way they're carrying themselves. Interesting. One person put George for the rebel. Okay, so I'm going to say that Kramer is the rebel. He won't do something if there are expectations of him doing something. And on the contrary, everything that he does is unexpected. And I feel like, Jerry will go out of town and he'll ask Kramer to do something, and Kramer does not do it, decides not to do it for whatever reason. All right, now we have the obliger. Any thoughts on who really relies on those external expectations or accountability? I think with work in particular. Seeing some George here. Yeah, mostly George's. I would agree. George really cares about external expectations, and he needs them for work. I don't think, I think George would have a difficult time being an entrepreneur because it seems like in all of the episodes, he's like reporting to one boss or another. And if he doesn't have a ton of work to do, then he's just not doing a ton of work. But, he could definitely, if I were to coach George, I would be able to help find some accountability systems for him so that maybe eventually he could be that marine biologist or architect that he always likes to say that he is. Okay, now these ones get harder. So I've had mixed answers with who we think the questioner is. And I would say, again, it's more about their kind of their work than maybe the things that they may say all the time. So who would you identify as the questioner? Funny. Okay, so I'm getting a lot of Jerry's, and I would say in this case, it's actually Elaine. If we remember, there was a whole episode about her trying to decide, which guy she was dating was worthy of her contraception. But even though, and another part about her is that she has to be very detail oriented. And I think questioners, she's a writer for that catalog. I think questioners, they do really well with data and details in particular. I'm glad you thought that was funny. If you remember that, the sponge episode. Yeah, exactly. Great. This is one of my favorite shows. So I've probably seen all of the episodes, and I lived in New York City when they were being taped. So it holds a special place in my heart. Yes, go back and watch it. Let's have a watch party. That'd be really fun. Okay, so that brings us to Jerry. And I know that it's confusing because part of his like comedic shtick is, what's the deal with this and that? It's just his way of doing comedy is a lot of questions, which is just kind of an observational humor. But if you think about his work style, he has to be 100% accountable to himself. I mean, maybe to his manager a little bit, but if he decides he wants to get booked on the Tonight Show, he's going to make it happen. If he's going to write some new material, like you never see him, running super late for things or, not being able to come up with his material. It's just like he knows what he wants to do and he gets it done. He doesn't need those external expectations or accountability so much. He can meet kind of his inner accountability. So hopefully that was fun for everyone. If not, it was fun for me. So it's kind of like a nice little break in all this somewhat intense, serious stuff. So let's move on to accountability. And almost every tendency benefits from some type of accountability, and the difference going to be in the form that it takes. So accountability means that there are consequences for your actions. And when we believe we're being held accountable, even to ourselves, we show more self-command. So based on your tendency, the question is, how do you tweak your goals to be more successful? So I have accountability homework for each of you in the next 24 hours. I'd like you to connect with at least one other person here and schedule a time to connect in 2 weeks. So I'm glad you thought the activity was fun. This is a good time to write your LinkedIn or copy your LinkedIn into the chat. if you are open to connecting with people, or if you prefer to connect via email, or if you want to share some other way for people to connect with you on social media, feel free to add that in the chat. Great. Thanks for starting that sharing. And so, I hope all of you will connect with each other. One, you're all here at Twin Cities Startup Week with probably some common goals. And the fact that you're attending this session also tells me that you have some things in common. So all of you could be really great connections for each other. And I think that's another fun part of Startup Week, and something that I like to include in all of my workshops is the opportunity to connect, because I think that's super important. So feel free to continue sharing your contact information. And I'm going to get into some different types of accountability. And so again, schedule time to connect with a buddy in about 2 weeks. And I found that this is a great way, you can check in on your SMART goals, but it's also just a great way to network and learn about each other's businesses, and hopefully deepen some of the connections that you're making here. All right, so different types of accountability. Some examples of group accountability would be like Facebook groups or Weight Watchers. Accountability partners can be fitness trainers, coaches, colleagues, even your pets. When it's midday and your dog's barking to go outside, that's helping provide some accountability, maybe for you to get some walks or activity or breaks throughout the day. Going public with accountability, like posting online, can be really effective, or commitment devices like fitness trackers or paying for a gym membership. So here's a summary of the Four Tendencies and kind of their mottos. I think this is a kind of a great way to remember each one. So for the Upholder, discipline is my freedom. For the Obliger, you can count on me, and I'm counting on you to count on me. The Questioner, I'll comply if you convince me why. The Rebel, you can't make me, and neither can I. And that's not quite fair to the Rebel, because you really can make yourself do whatever you want, but you definitely don't want somebody else to make you do that. Yeah, I think these are great. Question about accountability. I really resist general accountability, especially for people not intimately involved, aware of the project and why. So I would say in that situation, you may not see the reason why they have to be involved. So sometimes it's just getting some clarity, like, well, I'd love to be able to share that information with you, but maybe a nice way while you're not. But I actually need to really focus on the project right now. If there's something that you need that's going to help me to improve the project, I'm definitely open to feedback. But I need to focus on actually executing the project and not get into the weeds, because that's going to slow down my own progress. So sometimes it's explaining to other people what works for you, or trying to understand why they need what they need. So I don't think that you're resisting general accountability. I think this is a really funny hallmark of questioners. Questioners hate being questioned. It's very, very weird. Like, questioners love to ask the questions, but they hate being asked the questions. So I think this is something definitely for you to dive more into, to learn about how to better leverage your tendency. But you might just be able to provide some clarity for that person, and then level set on expectations. Like, I need to focus on this, and if you need some milestones, we can discuss that. But kind of clarifying or letting them know that maybe it's not necessary for them to know every minute detail of your process. And I'll take help on identifying the right question to ask, but not on clarifying the right answer. Okay, great. So let's move on to some accountability tools. And these could be like whole presentations in themselves. The key strategies actually for each of our tendencies. So while we all benefit from that accountability, the obliger in particular benefits the most from leveraging different types of accountability. It doesn't have to be accountability to a client. You can create internal accountability with tracking, being accountable to yourself. You can imagine your future self for that accountability. It's like no one's telling you that you have to get up 30 minutes earlier in the morning and go for your walk, but your future self will thank you. So just thinking about your future self can be a good accountability piece if there's no actual person that's holding you accountable there. For the upholder, scheduling is huge. I'd say this is definitely the case for myself. I don't use a to-do list. All of my to-dos are on the calendar at the times that I'm most likely to be able to get them done. Like if it's a financial thing that I'm not going to access from my work computer, it might be scheduled on a work break or before or after work, or even sometimes on the weekends. Or if I need to schedule an appointment or connect with a certain person, I put it on my calendar at the time that I'm most likely to be able to make that happen. For the questioner, that clarity, asking enough questions to get that clarity is really huge. And for the rebel, again, it's the identity. All right, so some accountability tools, and these are just a few examples of some things that I've personally used. Fitness trackers like Fitbit. I know people like their Apple Watch or their Garmin. For nutrition, I think Noom is great. I've also used my Fitness Pal a lot. Mindfulness apps, Insight Timer, Dan Harris's 10% Happier is also great. They have lots of, teachers and talks on there as well. And you can even find groups to keep you accountable. My cat is a rebel. Yeah, I think most cats are rebels. I have a cat as well, and I don't know. I can't take it for walks, so I think that's probably one indicator that they don't agree with me. But maybe most cats don't like to be taken for walks. All right, so some other productivity tools. Calendars in general for time blocking. I like to just use my Google Calendar for everything to have it all in one place. I use a focus to do timer. That's an app for Pomodoros, which is just the technique of having focus time for a certain amount of time and then scheduled breaks. Toggle is a great app for time tracking. You can track everything from how many hours you're sleeping to your commute if you have one of those. You can look at billable hours versus, hours that are used for other things, maybe prep time that you can't bill, or, creating marketing for your own business. And a lot of my clients will share their Toggle time tracking progress as an additional form of accountability. Turia is kind of an all-in-one system that I'll talk a little bit more about. Some focus hacks. Basically, the top 3 ideas here are find ways to limit distractions, take breaks, like the Pomodoros can be helpful with that, and really create clear boundaries, which means saying no, especially for the obligers. Some specific tools, Microsoft Focus Assist would allow you to avoid distracting notifications when you need to stay focused. So it could be, putting your Teams on Do Not Disturb, but there are other ways to do that as well. There's also Apple's Do Not Disturb. I have my phone next to me right now for the timer, and it's on Do Not Disturb, which is awesome because the last thing I need is to get, dings and pings while I'm giving a presentation. Downtime is like a nap for your screen time, and you can schedule that, and then only phone calls and apps that you choose are available. You can also set app limits for your most distracting apps, and they refresh every day at midnight. So some people will put an app limit on their social media and say, well, I can only use it for an hour. I've also had people tie their social media to other activities, like and Netflix as well. Like I can only do social media or Netflix while I'm doing exercise. So that can be a great way to tie something that you really should be doing with something that you enjoy doing. And then I think the newsfeed eradicator is fun. If you still want to access your Facebook or Twitter on a break, but you want to limit the time you use it, this newsfeed eradicator removes the most addicting part of social media, which is actually the feed, and replaces it instead with an inspirational quote. And you can still have access to the other functionality as usual. You just won't get sucked into the attention hole. So I think this could be beneficial maybe if like you want to go on Facebook and you want to post something, but you don't want to get distracted by what everybody else is posting. And we just have a few more minutes until half past, and we'll have some time for questions too. So this is the Turia app. I did a collaboration with Turia earlier this week on mindful productivity, and we've been collaborating over the last several months just because both of us have such a focus on mindful productivity solutions. So what's neat about this app is that it includes mindful breaks. You can get into an execution mode with a focus timer. It helps to manage your work and your wellness, and you can also stay accountable with friends and peers. And Nirael says that most distractions come from within. So it's not even always just the text notifications and things like that. It's like our own internal discomfort. And meditation is a really great way to manage our own internal discomfort. So I definitely recommend taking a look at that. I believe in the worksheet, there's a link to that. Also from the worksheet, there's a place to put in your key strategies for accountability, key strategy for your tendency, some of these focus apps. And that brings us to the final slides to reassess. Reassess for lasting change. So take a moment to add a date on your handout, potentially earlier in the week, about 4 weeks out, maybe that Sunday or Monday around the week of 10/18 would put us at about 4 weeks so that you can get a sense of your progress on the SMART goal that you've created. And when you evaluate your goal progress, you want to check in. 4 weeks is great, but you can also check in weekly. Ask yourself, am I meeting my goals? And if not, are they still achievable? Do they need to be readjusted? Are these goals still important? Or do I need to make adjustments in the timing of the frequency? Like going to the gym for an hour, 5 days a week is just not going to happen. Can I walk outside for an hour? Or can I go to the gym 3 days a week? You might also need to replace with a different goal. When the pandemic hit, I couldn't go to the gym for swimming and weights, so I was walking outside and doing body weight exercises at home. It's also okay to abandon a goal if you realize it doesn't align with your vision for yourself. But I encourage you to challenge yourself to a new goal that's better aligned. Like one of my goals in the past year has been to find a new recipe for my daughter and me to do together. And the underlying goal is for us to eat healthier and also to have some quality time. All right, so how coaching helps for obligers in particular, providing that external accountability, for upholders, gaining perspective and balance, for questioners, reflecting on why these goals are important and really customizing those solutions to you, and rebels, finding out what's the identity that's going to help you to be successful. So the takeaways here, you've learned to clarify your desires, create smart and smarter goals, leverage your tendency, identify accountability, and use the productivity tools. And that reassess and recommit is part of the ER to make your goals smarter.